The palace courtyard in Zarzuela was unusually quiet that September morning. The golden leaves of early autumn danced gently across the stone pathways, brushing against the boots of guards who stood respectfully at attention. Within the palace walls, however, a scene of tenderness and emotion was unfolding, one that very few expected. Princess Leonor, heir to the Spanish throne, was saying goodbye to an infant she had come to love dearly. Leonor, now 20, had spent much of her summer navigating intense military training, preparing for her final stretch at the Air Force Academy. Yet behind her stoic discipline and the burden of her royal duties, she had developed a personal bond with a small child who had temporarily come into her care through a palace-sponsored humanitarian program. The infant, a girl named Amira, had been born to a young refugee mother who tragically passed away shortly after childbirth. The program, launched quietly by Queen Letizia months earlier, aimed to provide temporary care for displaced children while arrangements were made for foster families. When Leonor learned of the infant's situation, she surprised everyone, including her parents, by volunteering to help. "Let me take part in this, Mama," she had told Queen Letizia firmly. "If I am going to represent the future of Spain, I need to understand responsibility not just in uniforms and ceremonies but in love and compassion." Her words had touched her mother deeply, and over the following weeks, Leonor spent countless hours with baby Amira. She fed her, read to her softly in Spanish and English, and often lulled her to sleep with gentle humming. Even Princess Sofia, her younger sister, was astonished by Leonor's devotion. "You're supposed to be the soldier," Sofia teased one evening as she walked into Leonor's room to find her rocking the baby. "And yet here you are, more motherly than any of us expected." Leonor smiled at her sister's words, though there was a flicker of worry in her eyes. She knew her time with Amira could never last forever. September 12 arrived like an unwelcome guest. Arrangements had been finalized. Amira was to be placed with a loving Spanish foster family in Madrid. It was a moment of hope for the infant, but one of sorrow for Leonor, who had grown deeply attached. That morning, Princess Sofia noticed her sister sitting silently in the palace garden, Amira asleep in her arms. "Leo," Sofia said softly, using her childhood nickname for Leonor, "you don't have to be strong all the time. It's okay to cry." Leonor shook her head at first. "Princesses don't cry in public." "But this isn't public," Sofia replied, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand. "This is just us." The bond between the sisters had always been close, but moments like these made it even clearer. Sofia admired her older sister's sense of duty, but she also wished Leonor could allow herself to be human. Later that day, as the appointed hour neared, the royal family gathered discreetly in one of the palace reception halls. Queen Letizia, her face calm yet filled with empathy, kissed her daughter's forehead. King Felipe stood close by, offering the quiet strength of a father who had once faced similar moments of farewell in his military life. The foster family arrived, a young couple, smiling nervously as they approached the princess. Leonor stood tall, the baby wrapped securely in her arms. For a moment, time seemed suspended. She looked down at Amira, who gazed back with wide, unknowing eyes. Leonor bent her head and whispered in Spanish, "Eres amada, pequeña. Nunca lo olvides." "You were loved, little one. Never forget that." Tears welled up in her eyes despite her efforts to contain them. Sofia, standing nearby, felt her own throat tighten. The couple stepped forward, and Leonor hesitated for the briefest second before placing the infant gently in their arms. It was a small act, but for Leonor it felt monumental, as though she were giving away a piece of her heart. As the foster mother cradled Amira, the baby gave a soft coo, unaware of the weight of the moment. Leonor reached out and brushed her tiny cheek one last time. Then she stepped back, her hands clasped tightly together. The room was filled with silence. Even the palace staff who had gathered discreetly in the background felt the gravity of the scene. Sofia placed an arm around her sister's shoulders, whispering, "She'll be safe, Leo. You've given her the best start." That night, after Amira had left with her new family, Leonor retreated to her room. She removed her military jacket, folded it neatly, and sat down at her desk. A journal lay open in front of her, something she had kept faithfully since beginning her royal training. She wrote, "Today, I learned that true strength is not only found on the battlefield or in classrooms of strategy. It is found in the quiet pain of letting go, in trusting that love can continue beyond your reach. As future queen, I must remember this lesson. Leadership is not about holding tightly, but about knowing when to release with faith. When Sofia entered the room later, she found Leonor wiping away tears but smiling faintly. "You wrote again?" Sofia asked. Leonor nodded. "One day, when I am queen, I want to look back at these pages and remind myself of the moments that shaped me. Not just the ceremonies, not the uniforms, but this." Sofia sat down beside her, resting her head on Leonor's shoulder. "Then maybe I'll remind you too," she said softly. Though the farewell had been a private family moment, word of it quietly reached Spanish media within days. The story of Princess Leonor's personal involvement with the infant touched hearts across the country. Newspapers ran respectful headlines, "The future queen who loved an orphan child." Citizens admired her humanity, praising her as a monarch in waiting who understood the value of compassion as much as discipline. For Leonor, however, it was not about public recognition. In her heart, it was simply about Amira, the infant who had taught her that love is both a gift and a test. As autumn deepened, Leonor threw herself back into her military training, but those who knew her best, especially Sofia, noticed a new layer of maturity in her. She carried herself with the same regal dignity, but her eyes seemed to hold a quiet depth, the mark of someone who had loved and let go. In time, she would face greater challenges, political crises, international duties, and the eventual weight of the crown. Yet perhaps none would test her heart in quite the same way as the day she whispered goodbye to an infant in her arms. And somewhere in Madrid, a baby girl was growing up with a foster family, never knowing that the future Queen of Spain had once been her first guardian angel.